continues to wonder, where do our tax dollars go? You're about to see, in addition to what the Recreation Department provided on a public update, you're going to see from the police department's perspective where the investment goes. And now we all remember Chief Whitney very fondly. And if I had asked Chief Whitney to provide a 15-minute presentation, he would provide a 45-minute presentation. So I'm asking Chief Benites to provide a 15-minute presentation, and I believe it'll be 15 minutes. So Chief, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. That's a tough order. I was going through this material and I did have to cut it down quite a bit. So I'm here this evening to talk a little bit about things as they relate to the police department. As we find ourselves on what we hope to be the downslope of the COVID pandemic, it's very important for us to communicate what we are doing to our community. And I think over communication is best. I could probably speak for some time on this. I would look forward to doing this more in the future. But it's important to know what issues and trends we are facing at the police department. Last year, very unusual year, unlike any other I've seen in my career. What I can say is Oxnard did not experience a lot of the turmoil that happened across this country. And without going into more detail, I will say that one of the main reasons has to do with the policing philosophy that our department has, and along with the good relationship that it has with the community. Our officers are engaged in a wide variety of work, and there's three just pictorials here. And each picture you see here is a story in itself. But it's important to see that during the course of their duties, officers have to shift gears from one role to another during the course of their day. Wearing the hats of an enforcement officer, a counselor, a crisis intervention officer, et cetera. And these photos were taken actually just kind of during the COVID period and some before, but they show that there's just a huge variety of work that happens in the course from the mundane to the, as we can see, highly unusual things that they deal with. But nonetheless, the work goes. Moving into this year, this slide tells us where we are as of today in terms of crime. And if you look at the numbers to your right, you see at the bottom that overall crime is down actually 15.2% from this time last year, which is actually very encouraging news. When you break it down, violent crime is actually down by almost 26%, and our property crimes are down by 13.25%. Now, you can see though that as COVID begins to thaw, we anticipate that some of these activities could potentially ramp up. But people ask, well, what else do you deal with here? Now, let me just give you some numbers here. Aggravated assaults, we respond to approximately 380 last year, and that was compared to about 374 the previous year. Homicides, we usually average about 14 per year. And you can see in 2020, we had 5, and we are at 3 this year. What's very important to note is that with a lot of reduced activity, people not leaving their homes during last year, it did change the landscape for what we had to deal with. Vehicle collisions, for example, went down very significantly. And to give you an idea, in 2019, we responded to about 5,500 vehicle collisions. That's injury, non-injury. Compared to the COVID year, 4,700. And about 1,000 of those in 2019 were injury accidents. Now, where it gets sticky is, and you don't see this because it's not recorded by the DOJ crime stats, but you see that our fatal traffic collisions are actually an issue in this city. In 2019, we had 16 fatal traffic collisions. Last year, that number, because of the less people out, reduced to 9. Well, as it stands today, we're currently at 8 collisions, and we're only at the very beginning of May. So it's something that I think we need to, the city, we need to try to do everything we can to keep those down. Next topic has to do with firearms. Now, what you see here is not something that I just cherry picked out of a photo archive. Well, all I had to do for these was to pull these from recent news releases that you can actually see on our Facebook page. And I think the rifle that you see up in the upper left-hand corner was one I notified council about three to 4 weeks ago when we had a foot pursuit through a neighborhood in the South Oxnard, and this weapon was involved in a shooting. This is something our officers are encountering on a near daily basis. And to give you an idea, in 2019, we seized 174 firearms. Last year, that number jumped up to 230. And where we are today, we're at 65 year to date. And these are weapons that are seized related to an arrest or a crime. What I'm going to show you is a 25-second video that kind of illustrates how far our department has come and how dangerous the work is these days. Now, what you're going to see, I'll set this up. You'll see an officer, they just made a traffic stop, and one of the passengers from the vehicle flees into a convenience store. Our officer here gives chase to him, and you will see something that I'll explain in just a moment. And here we go with the video. It happens very quickly. Notice what's in his right hand. The gun. This is becoming more and more commonplace for our officers. Something very significant happens here too. I don't usually resort to showing a use of force on an environment like this, and definitely not on social media. But what we see here is this could have easily been a shooting. And what we see is these officers using great restraint and using the least amount of force as necessary to effect that arrest. And so I just wanted to point that out. This is what our officers are encountering. Next thing I want to talk about briefly is overdoses. And we are seeing a very large uptick in non-fatal and fatal overdoses in our city. And just to prove the point, on the right side of your screen, you see our day shift log from our watch commander from Sunday. Well, this was the entire CO's log for that day. It was 3 overdoses. And since then, I've actually had to add 3 more on top of this to the overall count for 2021 year to date. So last year, our officers went to 226 overdose calls, and they are actually treated more like medical emergencies now. We don't actually arrest them for overdosing like in years past. That's long since changed. But of that number, we've had 52 fatal overdoses in this city last year. And when we speak of the homicides and the traffic accidents that I mentioned earlier, this number far exceeds the sum total of all of those. And this is happening in a lot of places, in hospital rooms, in homes, out in the streets. It's happening everywhere, and it affects every facet of our population. So far this year, we've been to 6 dozen of these calls, and we've had 10 fatals this year in our city. As a result, the department partnered with Ventura County Behavioral Health, partnered with Ventura County EMS, and our officers now carry it in the lock zone. It's known as Narcan. I think Chief Whitney's mentioned this before. And just in 2020, we had 17 applications of when our officer got there first and administered that to the patient. Now you can see we're only 4 months into this year. We've already used it 10 times. So it's showing a definite uptick. But that leads us to the naloxone here. This is what it looks like actually. Narcotic sales, we're seeing a great increase in narcotic sales, particularly opioids, the prescription type medications, the hydrocodone, the Xanax. We have a news release that just went out a few minutes ago about a Xanax arrest we made. But these are things that have recently been encountered by our newly formed drug enforcement unit. We made a decision to leave the county task force to start our own drug enforcement unit that focuses in our own backyards and affects the quality of life of our community. And since they've been in action for the past several months, July will be 1 year. These are some numbers of what they have actually brought in. And without going into too much detail about the numbers, you'll see they're pretty hefty. Very proud of what this unit does in dealing with dope houses in neighborhoods that terrorize neighborhoods, the dope dealers that are peddling poison to our communities and literally killing people. Incidentally, this picture here, you may have seen this one. This is Canine Rocky. He actually hit on this pallet that you see behind him, which had 973 pounds of methamphetamine in it. Homelessness, obviously another large issue. I will say that It's my opinion that where the city is going now in addressing homelessness is greater than it has ever done in my entire career. And I'm speaking not just in terms of the police department, but in terms of what housing is doing, what other services are doing. And as a result, we handled approximately 4,200 homeless related calls last year. And that's about close to 5% of what our calls for service were in 2020. And our homeless liaison officers, the HLOs, they go out there to make outreach to our homeless population to try to steer them to services rather than enforcement as their first approach. This group actually handled about 2,500 calls on their own. Now, this also add to that 311 requests and other emailed complaints through their supervisor, or in many cases, my office to deal with. And these are just some typical examples of what they deal with. Priorities. Now, council adopted some priorities recently, and they are in alignment with what I believe is the vision for this department. We want to maintain our 911 emergency response times. That's a fundamental priority for us. But the big one here is restoring community policing. It's in line with our three police department priorities, community policing falling right under community safety and community engagement. But there are some challenges to this, and this is a very simplified org chart for us. In order to restore these services and to get where we want to go, it won't happen overnight. And because of the COVID, we lost an academy class. We've had some attrition in some of our academies. We are actually having a very difficult time, and staffing is probably the police department's biggest internal challenge for this year. We have 238 authorized sworn positions in our department. And as it stands today, 18 positions are vacant. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, that's about 7%. But when you add in the number of officers that are injured, we have 25 officers that are on the injured list that are unable to work right now out in the field. We have 7 more in the academy. And when you sum total that, you're looking at about a 20% operational vacancy rate. So where I'm going with this is that in order to have and help and maintain our 911 response times, we have to have a healthy patrol division that's well staffed in order to be available to address those calls. But it also competes with our ability to staff neighborhood policing resources. And so our neighborhood policing team is actually an offshoot of patrol. And these two priorities do compete with each other. So it is our goal in this coming year plus to try to respond and to try to restore these programs so that they're back in action. We can do it, but it's not going to happen overnight. We're working on some staffing plans to address the staffing issues that we are facing, and we will be ramping up our neighborhood policing team. We're going to have to be creative in ways that we do it, but I'm pretty sure we can. That takes us into the future, and I'm looking at, as we restore these things, we currently have 10 police beats in our city. You can see our beat map, which you'll see online. You'll see it on nextdoor.com. You'll see it on our website. These 10 beats, I believe that we are possibly ready in the next couple of years at the most to open an 11th beat. And I plan on, my best guess right now is that placing another beat in South Oxnard in what is known as District 4 South End is probably the most appropriate place to deliver the services to that area, to put more officers in the south end of town and balance out the call volume that's handled between all the beat cars. And then along with that, I do want to see us head in a direction where we are beginning to open storefronts that actually have staff assigned to them. And you can see these are the locations that I envision that heading in the next few years. So last thing I'll close with is that great work doesn't happen by accident. I thought I'd go out with something very positive. This has to do with our homeless liaison officers. And this is an example of what I see get across my desk fairly regularly. And it's good work that takes place in one form or another. And I won't read you the entire thing, but this has to do with two of our homeless liaison officers. They had been dealing with a person who was mentally ill and had a history of drug use. He was prone to aggressive outbursts in which he would scream at community members. He was essentially a nuisance. And our two officers, Officer Dave Garza and Nathan Langelier, they developed a relationship with this person after successive contacts, arrests, and communication. They finally were able to convince him to accept mental health treatment and secured housing for him. However, there wasn't a bed for him. And so these officers worked with him and Salvation Army and Oxnard Housing to get funding for motel room. The officer realized that this person did not have the funding yet, and this officer took it upon himself to pay for and provide meals for this person until he was actually housed. On his days off, he dropped off meals and essentials and ensured that he was staying in his room and behaving. This is an officer that doesn't seek to self-promote or ask for credit. He just simply gets things done and looks for solutions, even if it's not his responsibility. So the two officers made several follow-ups with him and developed a good relationship. Getting him housed was a group effort, and I think it's very commendable. But this is the kind of stuff that we do here, and I did want to point that out on the way out of this presentation tonight. So that concludes my update for the evening, and I hope I maintain my 15 minutes.
Thank you. It was 14 minutes, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. And Mayor and Council, I appreciate the time. But I wanted to share with everyone just the kind of workload that our police department faces, the just vast diversity of the work that they confront. And I know that they're tremendous at their work, but I just want to share from a non-policing perspective, a lot of the statistics and the images that the chief shared, just have to think of the human impact of our officers showing up to overdose situations, showing up to help out at accident scenes, not to mention the cases where they're actually in direct harm's way in terms of violent activity. So I just wanted to share that in terms of what they've been doing, especially throughout this pandemic year that we're coming out of. And with that, I see you have the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Perrello.
Mayor Pro Tem followed by Councilman Perrello. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. And Chief, I just want to compliment you on returning to the neighborhood policing program. I think that people don't realize that through that program, you're able to address problems up front and deal with them before they really become problems on the backside that we have to deal with. It. I think it's pretty effective. And also kudos to you for bringing home the drug enforcement unit. Those guys are working, I say gang or guys, those officers are just working phenomenally out there. I see the stats that they're producing. They're incredible. And I just wanted to make one comment. You know, you mentioned the vacancies that you have. And I think my memory is still accurate, but it may be a little flawed because I'm in that older generation now. But generally, if council were to say to you today, you have 25 new positions, you're looking at a 6 to 12 month recruitment period, doing background and everything else, and then a 6-month academy, and probably 3 months of field training. And that's for probably 1 out of every 100 applicants that gets through the process. So you screen a lot of people, you put a lot of people into a program, but you're looking at almost 2 years before you get a body on the street that's functional and able to be self-sufficient. So it's a long-term issue in terms of hiring and stuff. So, and I'm hoping my numbers were still fairly accurate. If I goof something up, please feel free to let me know. But would that be a fair statement?
Yes, it would. For example, we started with 9 in the academy last month. We are down to 7 in the academy that will graduate in October. They will go through about 5.5 months of field training before they are actually out. So we're talking this time next year. I have to weigh that against anticipated retirements, any unanticipated separations that we may have here. And so it's kind of like sometimes it's 1 step forward, 1 step back. And to change the staffing picture, it simply does not happen overnight. And so as a result, with our vacancy rate being what it is, it does not make sense for us to ask for more sworn positions at this point in time. We need to fill the positions that we have vacant now and get that handled. And so the ask there is community members. We need to hire people from this community. We need applicants. Send everyone here, send us somebody that you know that's interested in working here, whether it's as a dispatcher, as a records technician, as a police officer. You know, we really need to get there. But unfortunately, this is our biggest challenge. It's harder to get that neighborhood policing team back out there when I'm dealing with a patrol staff that is actually struggling to, you know, put out minimum numbers every day. So it does happen. And the last point about the drug enforcement unit, Mayor Pro Tem, is that I have to give credit to our staff. This is I had some staff come to me about this time last year with an idea, And I said, let's talk about it. And they had a lot of passion for what they do. And I am very amazed by the employees that we have here. They have an idea and they want to run with it. And with a little support and a little guidance, they can do some really good stuff. And the Drug Enforcement Unit is a good example of that.
Thank you, Chief. And with the added months to field training, you're looking at about a 24-month turnaround then to have someone on the street. And I know that you're not begging for positions right now. You're just trying to fill the ones you have. So, but I just want people to understand that from the day the light turns green, it's about 24 months out before we have a productive person on the street. So thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Perello.
Thank you very much, Chief, for the fantastic presentation. Those pictures, and I'd like to speak to the city manager right now. Those pictures in that video, I believe, are worth finding out if we can get it on the various social medias that are shared throughout the city of Oxnard, because those are extremely eye-opening. The amount of weapons, the city of Oxnard is doing a hell of a job getting the weapons off the streets. But when you see what's there and you see the interaction of the individual running into the store with the gun, we could have an entirely different story. We don't have that type of officer working here. And the other part that was amazing to me, the officer is struggling with the guy and everyone in that store is just standing around. Nobody's even getting out of the way or offering to help. Thank you very much. And I hope that we do share this with a tremendous amount of the people. 250,000 people in the city of Oxnard. They're not all watching tonight. And with Spectrum the way it is, I really hope, city manager, you get it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Perello. Chief, you know, I am also the Narcan. My understanding is that individuals or family members that have a potential person that's using drugs at home can get Narcan. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And do they contact the county or they contact the Oxnard PD?
They would have to go through a different program. They can go through, I believe they can go through a doctor. They can go through the county programs. I believe it can be, I'm not 100% sure, but it may be something that can be prescribed. I'm not 100% on that though, but it is common for us to come across people that actually have it. And when we come to places, these alleys and locations where we have, needles dispositive, a lot of times we find extended Narcan kits. Right?
That saved quite a few people. Also, the other thing too that I'm really glad you're going to put together is a neighborhood program. I remember in La Colonia, La Paloma was really very successful, where you had quite a few people there, but policemen participating, especially at Christmas time with the tamales and the gifts, and just getting the officers acquainted with the youth there was really, really positive. So I'm glad you're doing that too. And if I'm not correct, you said our crime is down 15%.
Year to date, correct. That's as of that is our preliminary estimate as of today. Each week we update that number, and it usually fluctuates throughout the year, but it's safe to say that I'm optimistic where we are right now. That's a good place to be.